So the next step is blocking in our lights and darks, blocking in our values. So I'm going to use, I just have a little paper towel over here that I'm blotting this on because it was pretty wet. I'm going to use the biggest brush I have, and I challenge you to use the biggest brush you have here because this is not about details. Remember, this is about starting. I'm also gonna add a little more paint. There's all kinds of palette organization methods. You can do whatever works for you. In general, I just try to keep stuff in the same place. So I'm gonna have the white on this side and the black on the other side. Some people get really organized with their palettes, which is great because then you don't even really have to look at it after a while. You just get used to where all the colors are on your palette. So that's a reason to be organized, is that you don't really have to look at it. Okay, so I have my value scale here. I have my layout, and I'm looking at my still life, and I'm thinking about where the darkest and lightest parts of my still life are. So this cast shadow, where the behind the book, to me, right around here is the darkest part of my composition, and also underneath the pot. So these cast shadows where an object meets a surface, usually the darkest areas. Obviously that's not always the case. So that's going to be that blackest black. And then the highlight is where the light is hitting. So the lightest light, which will be that white, is hitting here, but I also see some reflection in the wood of the table that's really light too. So we're gonna make comparisons, and then everything in between, like there's a lot of midtones here on top of my dusty old art books, that we'll be using these different midtones. So that's why this value scale is a reference. It's kind of telling us where we put our different colors, where we put our different values, not colors, where we put our different values, matching them to the painting. So you can do this with color, and why we're doing black and white is because you can see how it works simply with black and white, and then as you add color into your paintings, this foundation that we've built with just the black and white values, you can see how you can make this value scale in any color, and then you could make this like hot pink or hot green, and as long as you're staying true to the values, you're matching your values, you can change it to any color you want, which is kind of the awesome thing about values. So I'm gonna start with some of the darker tones. I'm not gonna make it super dark because we're gonna get, we're gonna keep doing it in layers and get darker and darker. So I'm adding a little bit of water. I'm gonna take some of this black that I had before and do like a dark gray, and I'm just blocking in, and as I'm doing it, this whole side of the pot is in shadow. And as I'm doing it, I'm refining, so I'm using the edge, I'm refining the shape just a little bit. This is a little taller, but I'm not doing any detail. And then this is all in shadow. So this is a big shadow shape. And the top of the book is darker, maybe about one of these mid-tones, darker but not too dark. So you can start filling that in. And I just have a little water on my brush to blend it a little bit. And it's nothing is perfect here. We're just getting the shadow and highlight shapes. So I got a darker tone, and I want to make this shadow shape here because I think it's really interesting how it comes from the book. We barely see the bottom where the table meets the wall. There's a little line there, but that gets really dark there. And then we have a little highlight coming through on the wall because it's close to the wall, and we have this kind of interesting shadow shape. So I'm just getting some paint down on the canvas, getting started, blocking things in. and we're thinking about the background and painting over the edges. So this is a dark tone between these two that I can add in while I have dark paint on my brush. So you don't want to leave the white space between the edges. And this is why some people start with like a gray or a mid-tone canvas, because it just, then you already have the mid-tone color down, right? Okay, so I'm gonna come in with some lighter sort of mid-tones, maybe between number 2 and 3 here, and start filling in these. And we can wait for it to dry and make it lighter, which is what I love about acrylics. And I see that the top of this is more rounded, so I'm adjusting as I go. And see how I'm painting over the edge here. I'm not leaving this white space of the canvas. I'm filling the whole thing up. And I need to make this a little taller, but I can keep on adjusting. And don't worry if it all starts blending in together, that's good. You actually could even blend while it's still a little wet, so you don't get any harsh, hard edges. And then, okay, I'm looking at this highlight, and the background of the wall is much darker. This is much lighter. So you could clean your brush, or sometimes I have like a dark and light brush. We can let this dry a little bit and paint lighter over it, or I could come in with just some white paint and really get this starting to blend in. Ooh, my brush was wet, but that's okay. Just to give us an idea of, this is really a lot more highlighted here. So sometimes using 2 brushes is great, cleaning it while you're working, and just using, you know, your water is great. And then I always kind of tap it out on a paper towel so it's not soaking wet. That got a little bubbly, which happens when it's too wet. So I'm gonna smooth it out with a drier brush and then let this section dry while I move on to some other sections. So I like making these happen in my demo because they're all the things that are gonna happen to you. And I wanna just show you how to go with it and keep going. Okay, I'm gonna wipe that off, but I'm not gonna put more water on it because it got a little too watery. I'm gonna go back to my big brush because I wanna start filling in the background now. Okay, I'm wiping it off. Now I'm thinking about, this is like number 2 on the value, and this is the last one, number 6. So the background has to be somewhere in between that. So it's kind of like the 3 or 4, or 4 or 5 here. So I'm gonna get a good amount of mid-tone mixed up. So I'm grabbing all this paint. I'm gonna grab a bunch of the white and bring it over here and just get a nice color mixed up. And if you want to try using the medium, this is where you could try that. So this is the glazing liquid. You can use any kind of gloss or gel medium. Of course, it's the first time I've used it and you gotta open it. And I just squeeze it right in to my color that I'm using, to my value. And it's clear, and you just mix it in and you'll start to feel right away that it's more like smooth, creamy, and it gives it, but it still gives it that painterly consistency instead of just watering it down. Okay, so we use the background. So I have a background tone that I'm coming in with, and we can use the background to further define our shapes. And you can fill in the whole canvas. And you're using this edge here, I'm painting over the edge of my object, and then I'll come back in and paint the object over, and that creates more realism. And also sometimes the paint layers, you know, you can are a little transparent and you can see through. So that's really filling in the space of your painting. And this tone is going to come down here. And now it gets a little confusing because we have colors, right? In the actual still life, there's brown for the table and gray for the wall. So instead of thinking about color, think about value. So it's a little darker here, but then gets really light. So I'm gonna add a little bit of black to this to make the differentiation between the table and the wall. And then I'm going to add some more white to it to get this highlight here. And now, you know, my books are getting lost, but that's okay because I'm gonna paint them back. I'm taking a little more black because what I saw was that I have my table starting up here on this side and down here on this side. So that is not correct. I need the line of my table, so I'm making it kind of dark to be the same across. There we go. And I'm gonna blend this in to create that variation, that gradation from the table. And then this, just fill it in with paint. Don't be afraid to use a lot of paint. I'm gonna add just a dip of water in here to fill this in. And this gets pretty light on the bottom, like maybe number 2 on our value scale. Okay, I'm probably gonna need to squeeze more white out of the tube, but I'm going to finish filling in some of these mid-tone grays that I have on my palette before I do that. So I'm gonna get above this shadow here and right here. So I'm like thinking of the big shapes. Right here, I know it doesn't look like a lot, but this is how we start paintings. And I'm gonna paint a little over. Now you can see this is already dry, which is good. I'm gonna paint a little bit over the edges of that shadow I had already put in because we are going to keep going and keep refining and painting over it. I'm just gonna close this up. And I'm gonna leave my value scale up there. And just keep refining these edges. Okay. Now that I have like my light, my dark, my shadow shape, I'm gonna come in and refine a little more, and I need to add more white paint. You'll find if you go through anything, the white paint might be what you would have to purchase a second tube of, because you can go through a lot. Okay, so I'm cleaning my brush a little bit, wiping it off on a paper towel, and I'm gonna squeeze some white paint over here because I got my palette wet somehow over there. All right, there we go. Now I'm gonna come in with just plain white and get some of these highlights, bring them back, because some of these highlights get lost. So right here, this part, and it's still a little wet, so I'm kind of just lightly brushing, and it's nice because the tone that's on there, the value that's on there gets picked up, and I'm just lightly doing the edge here, still with my big brush. So I'm gonna grab some more white paint and I'm refining this edge, thinking about where this edge is in my painting and lightening up the value here. Remember, this is, you know, I'm almost getting too much detail now. I'm not taking my own advice, but starts to get carried away because it's fun. Okay, what I don't have are the pages. So these are pretty light. So I just want to fill them with a pretty light gray. Get these shapes in here. And I need to fix this area. I'm gonna add some highlights just by like doing this with my brush just to get them down where I know I want it to be super light. So that's like down here, this reflection is really light. I wanna make sure I get, I'm almost like making marks to like remember where I want to leave it very light. Thinking about the shape of this highlight here. Okay, and now I'm going to go back to this other brush and I'm going to add a little more detail to this shadow shape. This isn't actually a little brush, it's a pretty medium-sized brush. So I'm taking some more black here and I'm refining this shape. Gonna add a little bit more of the liquid glaze in this to extend out. There we go. And to blend it in here. Again, you can just use water if you don't have that. So you can use water to blend or the glazing liquid. Okay, so this is some of my darkest areas here. So I'm refining this shape again. You know, I'm getting the right shape back. And I can use I can grab some of this, might have to squeeze some more black out. I can grab some of this darkest black and kind of use the edge of my brush to start to, again, refine and bring back these shadow shapes. So remember, this is all about starting and just getting the foundation of the shadows and highlights in. So I'm gonna refine this and mix it a little bit with that highlight that's there. And we can see the edge gets really soft here. So ways to make a soft edge are to blend it on the canvas. And then you can also come in with the different values. So you can almost like making like a rainbow of values, like stripes here. So you can blend it with water or medium, and then you can have all of your values set up on your palette and fade them out, almost like thinking about this in like rainbow stripes to make that really soft edge. I'm gonna get a little darker here, and you can see how I'm always just refining and refining. Okay, this is the table, so I need to do a little more work here. This is gonna get darker. And then we have the darkness under this book that, while I have dark on my brush, I can make sure to add that. So you cover stuff up and then you come in and refine your edges and make stuff more crisp and clear. This is an interesting area here because there's a really dark line and then the highlight. So that's kind of a detail that we might not necessarily get to in this painting, but it's interesting to start looking at shadows and highlights and see how they all work. So I'm just thinking about where shadows and highlights are. I have some dark on my brush that I'm just kind of blending in here. I used the medium in this part so you can see how it's still able to blend a little bit. Okay, this area needs some work. So I'm gonna come in with I have a lot of black on my paintbrush, so I'm gonna use that to kind of mix in, and I have a little water right here, this lighter tone where the pot, kind of see there's a highlight peeking through this edge. So we can refine this edge of the pot here and how it blends into this shadow. You see the book. And what shapes like this have what's called reflected light. So there's like the core shadow here, if you've taken my drawing class, and then there's the mid-tones, and then there's a little bit of highlight that helps make it three-dimensional, which helps turn the form, and it's called reflected light back on the edge. You can see it a little bit in my photo, I'll point it out. And the shape of this pot needs to be more, taking some white just on the edge here, needs to be a little more like this. So don't be afraid to refine and keep changing and painting over stuff. You know, you're never stuck. I'm gonna just blend that in, and I'm gonna take my bigger brush that's been sitting in the water, kind of wipe it off, and come back with this mid-tone color. And get that blended in to refine here.